Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Play Great Ace Attorney 2, Naruhodo's Resolve. This is Vitafuser, and on our last episode, we flashed back to the case of the Clouded Kokoro, or at least right afterwards, and found that Sosuke Natsume has once again been found as a prime suspect for murder. Jeez, nothing right ever happens to him. Also, Herlock Sholmes got an even sillier method deduction than usual. Thanks to the incriminating deductions of the great detective. My dear fellow, that honor belongs to you. Yeah, we kind of helped. Well, at least that means Inspector Gregson's no longer here. We can examine the crime scene in more detail now. Oh, and of course... What? Have you forgotten what the inspector mentioned before? It was the landlord, Mr. Garrideb, who discovered Mr. Shamspeare. Mr. John Garrideb, yes. I expect we could find him in his sitting room on the top floor as usual. Right, we must remember to go and talk to him later then. Alrighty, time to examine. What's this? It looks like part of an envelope, I think. It's about the color of his hair. Is that significant? Well, it's a little out of place even, when you look around the room. There's no sign of a letter, or the rest of the envelope, in fact, is there? She's right. And yet here we have the torn up end of an envelope. It just strikes me as unusual. I agree. We better take this, just in case. Alrighty, we have the envelope. Jeez. As we've seen from the outside, the window is completely bricked up. The vestige of former window tax that Britons had to pay. Strange things they used to tax in Great Britain. I mean, making people pay for the number of windows they had on property is extraordinary. It's heartbreaking to think of the poor having to block up their windows just to avoid an unaffordable tax. Oh, what is it, Mr. Zata? If you look closely, a number of bricks are loose. They are! An amateur has broken out a few of them just here. Was it Mr. Shamspeare I did it who wanted? Bingo Lodge and renting a room. And there's, soap. Ugh, it's so cold outside. You can feel it through this gap. It did snow all last night. It would be cold. More importantly, snow-covered lumps. It's more bars of soap. Soap? What are bars of soap doing lined up on a ledge outside the window? I have no idea. But the pair of them look rather charming like that. Still, that's very strange, isn't it? Bars of soap lined outside the window. I think perhaps we should take one. There are two after all. Oh dear. I suppose we could. Oh, what's this? Look here at the soap. In the middle there. There's a patch that's a different color, and it's sort of transparent, but it's some sort of fancy design, I suppose. Only in Great Britain. It looks like the Hinamaru flag of Japan, doesn't it? How wonderful. It's probably a very expensive brand. Expensive? And what's it doing in this ramshackle old room? Here we have another disproportionately large machine. Looks like a meter of some kind. Ah, this is a gas meter, I think. It seems in this district, residents pay for gas as they use it with coins. I see. And now you pointed it out, I can see that there's a slot just here that looks like it would take a coin. So you mean you put a coin in here? That's right. That would buy you about 2 hours of gas for lights and heating. So if you were a poor person with no money, you'd have to sleep in the freezing cold. Yes, or if you were scatterbrained with no change because you forgot to exchange your money at the bank. Thank goodness there's no meter in our office. One of the teacups that Mr. Shamspear and his guests drank from last night. But don't go drinking from them, Mr. Naruhodo. There's bitter poison inside. I'm not planning on drinking any, don't worry. Anyway, the cups are both empty. That's true. So, one was Mr. Shamspear's, and the other must have been the cup that Mr. Natsume was drinking from. But Sosuke-san wasn't poisoned, of course. Perhaps we should take these so we can examine them in more detail later. Alrighty, with that out of the way. That's everything here. Looks like you're having a good snoop around, eh? Mr. Inspector Gregson, back so soon? After I threw that little Japanese fella in the clink, I went and reported this to the investigation division. 5 minutes' time, this place will be cordoned off by the yard. I see. Well, we'd better be leaving then. Poor Mr. Natsume must be feeling very low being back on his cell again so soon. I'm sure the Go and he's alive! What's wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? Ah! He lives! Out! Out, brief candle! Life's but a walking shadow! A poor player! That struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. What is with that seafoam hair? Now, how soundeth the next part? It is a tale, told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Indeed! Oh, a happy day! Oh, there he goes. What? Walking Dead! No, that series won't be around until the next few hundred years. What? That fella isn't dead at all! What was that nonsense he was saying, though? I think, yes, it was from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. A soliloquy from Act 5, Scene 5. Shakespeare. Yep, the bard himself. So it was, that the victim, Mr. William Shamspear, came back to life. If the man had indeed been poisoned, it transpired that it hadn't killed him. He was taken by emergency carriage to a nearby hospital for treatment. And Inspector Gregson evicted us from the scene of the crime. Whatever that now was. Maybe we live in interesting times indeed. Whatever do you think will happen now? Good question. What a strange situation for Mr. Natsume, arrested for murder and then the victim comes back to life. I think perhaps the victim was never dead in the first place. It seems very likely Mr. Shamspear did consume poison as we deduced. But was it an accident, attempted suicide, or attempted murder? Until the truth can be established, I imagine the police will keep Mr. Natsume in custody. I suppose so. Let's hope it doesn't come to anything more than a night in the cells. Oh, what's this? Hey, it's that other guy from the case. What's that man doing over there? He looks like he's trying to see into Sosuke-san's lodgings. Is something wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? Excuse me, can we have a word? Hey! What is with the JoJo poses in this, chapter? He just ran off. I feel sure I've seen that man somewhere before. Where was it? I do too, but I don't remember. Alrighty. Time to go to the Garridebs room. Hang on. Jeez, these are cracked. I can't find anything out of place. This is a teacup from which Master Natsume was drinking. Unlike the other one, the inside of the cup is completely clean. I suppose he must have drunk the contents before the tea had a chance to leave a mark. I always gulp it down too. Sorry, Mr. Naruhodo. Well, if you just sip it little by little, it goes cold. Clearly, I shall have to instruct you in the proper way to take tea. Okay, there we go. This must be the cup that Mr. Shamspear was drinking then. It's stained on the inside. Tea does that, I'm afraid. Even green tea. Oh, really? I've never noticed before. You never noticed? Well, I never leave it in the cup long enough to leave a mark. I like to gulp it down. Geez, you have an esophagus of steel, because that would burn you something bad. Drink tea while it's hot. That's the Japanese way, isn't it? Oh dear, so many people seem to have the wrong idea about our culture. And most of them are Japanese. Alright, that is everything there. Time to move along to the Garridebs. Again. Alright. Here we are again. Eccentric landlord's eccentric top floor abode. Eccentrically. We're here because Mr. Garrideb's the one who discovered the incident this morning. Don't forget. And the miss won't be here.
Ah, you chaps, eh?
Yes, good morning, sir.
Thank you for your cooperation in court yesterday.
It was quite a trial. Damn straight. As much for Mr. Garrideb as anyone, really.
Came straight back here after all the business in the bailey yesterday. Didn't expect to wake up to more bally nonsense this morning.
I wonder if you wouldn't mind telling us exactly what happened, Mr. Garrideb.
Yes, I suppose you'd like to know all about that dead loss of an actor chap in the ground floor room.
Those were exactly Inspector Gregson's words, weren't they? Wow, he's actually standing up.
Alrighty.
This must have been a real shock for you this morning. I hear you discovered what had happened.
Oh, well, a hopeless actor chap rises at 5 o'clock sharp every morning without fail. At 5:30 this morning, he still hadn't lit the gas. So I went down and knocked on his door. No belly answer.
And that's when you broke into his room by kicking down the door?
Well, I called on that rum-looking Japanese chap to do the grunt work, of course.
Wasn't it a little premature to kick the door down? The man could have just overslept by half an hour. That's very true, Mr. Naruhodo. If 30 minutes oversleeping warranted such behavior, I'd have to kick your door down every morning.
Better to be safe than sorry and all that.
It's just me, or is he avoiding our gaze now all of a sudden? Except that it was a sorry situation indeed you found on the far side of the door. Mr. Shamspear. The victim's name is Mr. Shamspear, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, William Shamspear. Took the ground floor room 3 months ago now.
And how would you describe him?
In a word, destitute.
Destitute?
Well, let's face it, the only redeeming feature of that room is the cheap rent. Anyone wanting to live in a place like that is either broke or is a bully screw loose.
So hard to choose which category Sosuke-san would fall into. Mr. Naruhodo, that's a little rude.
He was doing research as well.
Research? Into what?
Shakespeare, of course. Shakespeare! Read a few plays of the old bard myself, you know. Romeo and Hamlet and all that.
That's Romeo and Juliet. He's England's most highly regarded classical playwright and author. He's known as Sao in Japanese, as you know, and many of his works have already been translated. Sao? Really? Anyone who reads manga or watches anime knows SAO as something completely different and without merit. It seems incredible that Shakespeare was shortened to Sao, although someone was too heavy-handed there. Those were a lot of costumes in the victim's room, actually, weren't there? Of course, Mr. Natsume is a scholar of English literature as well. I imagine he and Mr. Shamspear would have had much in common. Shakespeare interpretation disagreement leads to shocking murder. Let's hope it's not that. Mr. Naruhodo, really? How rude. After Mr. Natsume's trial yesterday, you came straight back here, I believe, didn't you? Did you notice anything strange between then and this morning?
Well, no, I must have been about 6 in the morning by the time I got home. Snow was coming down rather heavily, as I remember. It was completely dark already. That failed actor chap was out at the time.
Mr. Garrideb noticed there was no light from his room or something, I suppose.
Well, I couldn't summon the energy for anything for much, so I just sat in front of the fire pit. It was after 8 before Shamspear got back. And the chap was up until past 1 in the morning, I'll have you know. Suppose he made his end sometime after that. I was asleep by then, so I'm rather in the dark there.
Well, thank you. That was very illuminating. Is everything alright, Miss Susato? Well, I was just thinking it's a little strange, that's all. Everything about this is strange. You were up here in your room all evening, if I understood correctly.
Not a big fan of stairs. Not with this blasted leg.
Then, how is it you seem to know? The precise movements of your tenants on the ground floor, I mean.
Hey!
That's quite a face. That's a very good point. I can't imagine you could hear noises from the ground floor all the way up here. You would be surprised at what a pair of sharp ears can hear. Does this old man like to spy on his tenants? Is that it?
I say, I know what you're thinking. It's a bully outrage. I'm ex-military, don't you know? I don't go around spying on my tenants. Why would I?
Then how did you know, Mr. Garrideb?
It's the gas woman. The gas tells me everything.
The gas? What on earth do you mean, sir? How can the gas tell you anything, let alone everything?
Well, as you're probably aware, the gas is supplied to the building by pipes.
Yes, I've more or less worked that out. Every room in the building is connected by a single pipe to the gas main outside. And the gas company supplies gas to properties via the main. Yes, I understand that too.
Let me see if I can explain. Yes, let's say I were to light the gas lamps up here. What do you suppose would happen?
Well, obviously the room would get brighter.
Exactly. But at the same time, the lights in all the other rooms of the house would dim for a moment.
What? They dim? Why? Perhaps it's because when you light a gas lamp, it briefly uses more gas than usual. And that reduces the amount of gas in the pipe for the other lamps that are connected to it. That might explain why the other lamps dim momentarily, mightn't it? Yeah, yes, of course, because everything's connected to a single supply pipe. Is that supposed to happen, though? It sounds rather undesirable.
Jolly good point. Fact is, gas companies' pipes in these parts are pretty hopeless, long worn out, and barely got any gas in them to start with. The opposite's also true, of course. Extinguish the lamps up here and they glow brighter than the rest of the house.
I see. So by watching the flickering of the lamps in one room, you can determine what's happening elsewhere.
You got it.
Oh, of course. Because when people come back home in the evening and before they go to sleep at night, what they're guaranteed to do is either light or put out their lamps and fires. Clever?
Point of fact is, the room on the ground floor and the one above it use slightly different amounts of gas. By watching the lights in here closely, I can work out exactly what's going on in the whole house.
Gosh, that's fascinating, Mr. Garrideb. Absolutely fascinating.
Oh well, nothing to it really.
And I can't really see that it's going to help us with the case either. What I'd like to know is why Mr. Garrideb is so interested in what his tenants are up to in the first place. Feels like there's more to it than idle curiosity. Well, we've done as much investigating here as we can, I think. Perhaps we ought to go to the prison and speak with Mr. Natsume again. Good idea. Alright, we've taken care of everything here. It's time to move... What I said is, it's time to move to prison. There he is. Look, Mr. Naruhodo. Mr. Natsume, have the police finished questioning you now?
Look, I'm student Mr. Naruhodo, Esquire.
Yes?
What is he? Tell me. Is he a ghost? Is he here to haunt me?
Let me guess. You're talking about Mr. Schultz? He actually calls himself a great detective, Mr. Natsume, not a ghost.
But his diabolic deductions. They're not of this world. They've left me...
Cursed. Uncursed, I tell you. Well, that sort of hurts. Credit where credit is due, Mr. Naruhodo. You were heavily involved in the deduction, too. Moving on. We have some wonderful news. Oh! The victim we all thought was dead has come back to life again. Now, in the absolutely worst case, you can only be tried for attempted murder. That's great, isn't it, Mr. Natsume?
It's terrible!
Oh.
I'm stuck in the cell, suffering for some silly wrong end of the stick.
You did it, didn't you?
Confess, you're a killer. Why the mustache? Constant questions.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Ah, that selfish shyster. Make up your mind. Are you dead or alive? If you are going to come back to life, why bother dying? Wickedly wishy-washy William.
Well, it seems likely Mr. Shamspeare was never actually dead in the first place. Oh yes, that might make sense. I'm pleased to hear he's alive, of course. A lively debate last night was much fun. It'd be sad to think it was our last. Oh! Oops. Mr. Natsume, does this mean that you did see the victim last night? You met with Mr. Shamspeare, didn't you?
I didn't say another word. I demand to have a lawyer present.
Who do you think I am? hell do you think I am? Please, Mr. Natsume, we need to hear your side of the story. Why am I cursed like this? I ask myself that a lot. Can you tell us exactly what happened last night, Mr. Natsume? There's nothing to tell! But Mr. Naruhodo Esquire, I'm eternally grateful to you for helping me with that accursed case yesterday. The case that saw poor Miss Green hospitalized after she ended up with a knife in her back. It's hard to believe that was only yesterday. After the trial was over, I trudged my weary way back to my lowly lodgings. And that evening at past 9 it must have been, I visited Mr. Shakespeare. So you did go to the victim's room then? As we feared. I didn't do anything wrong! I'd never been to his room before. It was the first time. Then what made you decide to go? I bumped into him when I arrived back at the house. We got chatting and it developed into a discussion. But he had to go out, so I bade him farewell. That ties with what Mr. Garrideb said, that the victim went out and came back after 8. We met again later that evening at around 9 or just after. When I took him some nice tea I'd brewed as a gift. So it was you who brought the tea that had clearly been drunk at the scene then. And I suppose you were discussing the works of Shakespeare, were you? Or Shakespeare. Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Romeo and Juliet! Who was the stronger? It was a delightful debate. I'm sure such a stimulating subject, Shakespeare. And the debate became very heated, so you slipped poison into Mr. Shakespeare's tea. No! Never! Not at all! Team Juliet won! That was me! And when I left his room, the flamboyant fellow was fighting fit. I swear it, categorically! Mr. Natsume, you often say the same thing about yourself, I've noticed. That you have a cursed existence. I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before, but I've been here in Great Britain for a year now, and in that time I've learned it's no place for me. It can be very trying to live in a foreign land and adapt to the ways of another culture. There are foreigners everywhere I look, and they all stare at me. They all laugh. That's the impression I get whenever I go out. It makes me scared to leave my room. Which is why I've become a recluse. But even in my room I find no respite from my fears. I've moved more times than I can remember, and then 1 week ago I moved into Briar Road. Why? I mean, why did you choose that place? It doesn't seem very comfortable. Because the rent is cheap. I have so little money it spoke to me. The rent? Obviously there's a reason why it's cheap. Because the room is cursed. Cursed? Ow. The previous occupants, the man who lived there before I took the room, died there. Oh no! He was only a young man, but one morning he was found dead, and no one could explain why. Surely no one would want to live in a room with a history like that. I didn't. When the letting agent recommended the place, I wavered. But I want books, and books cost money. A horrible history is a small price to pay. When I realized it would mean I could buy more books, I signed the lease like lightning. Brave or blinkered? But after I moved in, I soon came to realize what I'd done. I realized how horrible that room's history was really. Gosh, was it really so awful? How did the room's horrible history affect you, Mr. Natsume? What happened? At first, it was just a feeling. The feeling of beady eyes boring into my back, watching me. You think that might have just been your mind playing tricks on you? Oh, no. My mind doesn't know any tricks. It was someone else.
It's been one long nightmare ever since I was given the keys to that place.
You've been having bad dreams, you mean?
Oh, all the souls who've died in that room lean over me in my sleep and try to strangle me.
That really is horrible.
And now I come to think of it, it happened again last night, too. The very same night that Mr. Shamspear was writhing in agony from the poison in his body. I was on the verge of being suffocated silently by those miserable spirits in my room.
You simply must move out of that room as soon as possible.
Yes, you're right, I know it, and that's why. I'm already searching for the next room with a history to call home.
I think perhaps you should try to avoid accommodation with any kind of history at all. Otherwise, I'm scared that you yourself may become history. And not in the good kind. Susato-san sure knows how to make the man listen.
Of course, Mr. Lord of the Manor is worried about the curse in the room as well.
You mean Mr. Garrideb?
Yes, he knows that if people keep dying there, he'll never be able to rent it out again.
Well, that's true. I, for one, wouldn't go near the place. Ah, perhaps. That may explain why the landlord pays so much attention to the gas lamps in his tenants' movements. You mean because he's worried about their well-being? He does seem to have an unusually keen interest in the amount of gas in the pipes. That must be a reason why he keeps such close tabs on the occupants in his rooms.
What do you mean he pays so much attention to the gas lamps?
Oh dear, no! It's nothing to do with you, Mr. Natsume. Please forget I said anything.
Oh, now you're talking about me behind my back as well.
What's important is that Mr. Shamspear isn't in fact dead at all. Once he's come round and he's able to tell us what happened, we'll be able to get you released.
Yes, please! Oh, I do hope you're right! Excuse me.
Inspector Gregson.
I heard him overhearing what you just said, and I'd like to know. I have some good news, and some bad news. Oh, what you want first? Always, every time, bad news comes first. When hope is all you have, hold on to it. That is my guiding principle. Right, well, in that case, the good news it is. Huh? Sorry, it's just a lot easier to explain everything that way.
Then why did you ask me my preference?
As you might have heard, the victim, Mr. Shamspear, was just unconscious. He's come round now.
Yeah, we saw it happen in all its terrifying glory.
Hey, he's still being treated by the doctors, but we managed to get a written statement from him already.
Oh, isn't that wonderful, Mr. Natsume?
Oh, thank goodness, it's all over then. I can leave this somber cell. Sorry, no, that's not on the cards.
What?
Why ever not, Inspector? Mr. Shamspear has implicated someone as being responsible for what happened in last night.
Implicated someone? I don't like the sound of this.
Oh dear. You don't mean... Sorry to say I do, yes. He's pointed the finger at you, Mr. Natsume. Ah! By sweet poison did he seek it to end my life. By wicked caitiff, Soseki Natsume. No! I'm afraid you'll be appearing at court as planned. You'll be wanting to make some necessary preparations. No!
And so, once again, Sosuke-san found himself having to take the dock in the Old Bailey. Whether his room was haunted or whether he was just terribly unlucky, I knew I had no choice. The following day, I would represent him in court, and do my utmost to break the curse that blighted him. To be continued. And we will cut it off right there. I'll see you guys next time as we go into court.